Which of Earth's 11 prehistoric eras was the absolute most terrifying and had the highest mortality rate? Some might argue it was the Cretaceous period when dinosaurs ruled the planet, while others might say it was the Silurian, dominated by giant fungi, or even the Permian, which almost completely wiped out the history of life on Earth. But debating it here is pointless. This time, we are going to travel through time chronologically and grade these eras across 4 dimensions: food, shelter, weapons, and threats, to pick out the truly most brutal era in Earth's history. First up is the Cambrian period, which kicked off the evolutionary explosion of life on Earth. During this time, Earth had no dry land, no plants, and absolutely nothing you'd find familiar. The entire planet was just one scorching ocean. The carbon dioxide level in the air was 15 times higher than it is today, and oxygen was so scarce that if you didn't bring a respirator, you'd suffocate in 3 minutes. On land, there was nothing but microbial mats. Your only food options were marine invertebrates. Trilobites were basically the crawfish of this era, and there were so many you could never eat them all. But they had rock-hard calcite shells, so you'd have to smash them with a rock for ages just to get a tiny bit of meat. There were also early chordates like picaya, which probably tasted a bit like fish but were so small you'd eat them in one bite. Worst of all, there were no fruits or vegetables here, meaning you wouldn't get a single bit of vitamin C and would develop scurvy within 2 weeks, causing your gums to bleed, your teeth to fall out, and eventually your body to rot away until you died. Vegetarians have a 0% survival rate here. Want to build a home? Don't be naive. There were no trees and no grass, and literally nothing to even pitch a tent with. Your only choice would be digging a hole in the sand or hiding behind a massive rock. The only weapons you could find were rocks, shells, and coral fragments, while your ultimate opponent would be the apex predator of the Cambrian, Anomalocaris. It grew up to 2 meters long and sported a pair of spiked claws. While it wouldn't actively hunt a creature your size, if it accidentally grabbed you, it could rip your hazmat suit to shreds. The Cambrian period score is as follows: total score 15. Next up is the Ordovician period, 485 million years ago. Things got a tiny bit better, but the land was still completely barren except for some liverworts growing near the coastlines. Marine life flourished, but the dangers leveled up too. There were plenty of jawless fish to eat now. They were slow and meaty, but you'd still have to eat them raw because there was only moss on land and you wouldn't even find the materials to start a fire. Scurvy remained your #1 killer. Shelter-wise, it was not much different from the Cambrian, still no trees, and you still had to sleep on the beach. Your weapons were still just rocks and shells. The apex predator of the ocean was now Camarasaurus, a straight-shelled cephalopod. Stretching 6 meters long, it looked like a giant bullet. It would wrap its prey in dozens of suction cup tentacles and crush them with a parrot-like beak. If it got a hold of your arm, it could snap your bones instantly. The scariest part is that the end of this period would suddenly trigger the Hernantian glaciation, turning the entire planet into a giant snowball in just a few hundred years, and 2/3 of all marine life went extinct in a flash. If you got dropped here at the wrong time, congratulations, you'd be turned into an ice sculpture. The Ordovician period score is as follows: total score 16. 443 million years ago, the Silurian period arrived. Finally, the first vascular plants made it onto land. Even though they were only a few dozen centimeters tall, at least you could weave their stems into a sleeping mat. Fish species exploded, but whatever you do, do not eat the land-dwelling triganotarvids. When threatened, they secreted hydrogen cyanide, and one bite would kill you. In this era, you finally got some real estate, as the land was covered in prototaxites, giant fungi that grew dozens of meters high, and you could easily hollow one out to call it home. You also got a new weapon, the molted shells of eurypterids. You could sharpen their claws into knives. The baddest predator around was the very creature whose shell you were using. The largest species grew up to 3 meters long with massive claws. They didn't just rule the ocean, they could crawl right up onto land. If you were taking a stroll on the beach, you could easily get dragged into the sea and eaten by a giant sea scorpion. The Silurian period score is as follows: total score 20. Next is the Devonian period, a massive, era-defining turning point. Woody plants emerged, meaning Earth got its very first forests. What did that mean? It meant you could finally build a house and start a fire. This was the first era where the weather itself wouldn't directly kill you. At the same time, you became the apex predator of the land because you could finally lash a rock to a wooden stick to make a weapon. While you were invincible on land, the ocean was pure hell. The ruler of the deep was Dunkleosteus, 10 meters long, weighing 4 tons, with a terrifying bite force of 5 tons. It could snap a shark clean in half. It was basically an underwater main battle tank, and nothing alive could withstand its attack. The Devonian period score is as follows: total score 25. Moving into the Carboniferous period, atmospheric oxygen levels peaked at a historic 30%. What did that mean? It meant insects grew absolutely massive. We're talking 2-meter-long millipedes, 1-meter-long scorpions, and giant dragonflies with a 75-centimeter wingspan. But the bugs weren't the real danger. It was Proterogernis. This 3-meter-long amphibian looked like a cross between a salamander and a crocodile, and could move freely on both land and water. It would creep up to your log cabin and bite your leg off the moment you stepped outside. But there were some upsides. You could eat horsetails. Their tender shoots tasted a bit like asparagus and were packed with nutrients. There were also plenty of fish and small reptiles to hunt, and you could build much sturdier houses. But there was a fatal catch. The high-oxygen environment made wildfires insanely easy to spark. A single lightning strike could ignite an entire forest, and the fire would rip through the landscape at 100 kilometers per hour, leaving nothing but ash. One mistake while cooking dinner, and your entire base would be burned to the ground. The Carboniferous period score is as follows. Total score 25. During the Permian period, all of Earth's landmasses smashed together to form a single supercontinent, Pangaea. Its outer edges were lush forests, but the interior was a megadesert 10 times larger than the Sahara. You could only survive in the coastal forests. If you accidentally wandered into the center of the desert, you'd die of dehydration within 3 days. Conifers had evolved, so you could finally eat nuts. There were plenty of dicynodonts, parasaurs, and prehistoric synapsids to hunt. They were early mammal ancestors, so their meat tasted pretty good. For weapons, you could harvest the saber teeth of Gorgonopsians to craft superior knives. The apex predator here was Ankylosaurus. It was 6 meters long, weighed 600 kilograms, and had a skull twice as thick as a grizzly bear's. It was a living, flesh-eating battering ram. Your spear would look like a toothpick to it. It would charge right through your house and eat you alive. Of course, the Permian is most famous for how it ended, the Permian Triassic extinction, also known as the Great Dying. It was the most severe extinction event in Earth's history, wiping out 96% of marine life and 70% of terrestrial vertebrates forever. If you got dropped here at the end of the era, you'd be watching the literal end of the world. The Permian period score is as follows. Total score 22. After the Permian extinction, Earth had a ton of open ecological niches. Dicynodonts, pseudosuchians, and the earliest dinosaurs began battling for territory. The Triassic is known as the dawn of the dinosaurs, but they weren't the rulers yet. Giant land crocodiles were. Take Postosuchus, for example, 6 meters long, weighing 2 tons, it looked like a crocodile but could run incredibly fast on land. Or Ornithosuchus, which looked like a long-legged croc and could easily outrun you. Dinosaurs made their debut too. Meat-eaters like Herosaurus were already the size of a tiger, and while Coelophysis was small, they were pack hunters. If 50 of them swarmed you at once, all your spears wouldn't save you. On the bright side, your menu expanded. There were fish, turtles, and all kinds of small reptiles, meaning you didn't have to compete with the megabeasts for food. However, weapons and shelter didn't change much. The Triassic period score is as follows. Total score 21. By 201 million years ago, the Jurassic period had arrived, and dinosaurs finally took over the planet. The defining feature of this era was scale. Everything was massive. The earliest crabs appeared during this time, so you could catch them on the beach, and they tasted pretty much like modern crabs. Spears suddenly became useless because the enemies were just too big. Allosaurus, the apex predator of the era, was 12 meters long and weighed 5 tons. It would bite you in half before you even realized it was there. Then there was the 30-meter-long Diplodocus. It wouldn't eat you, but it never looked where it was stepping. One wrong step and it would crush you into mush or flatten your house with its tail. The oceans were even worse. Pliosaurs grew to 12 meters long and weighed 20 tons. They could swallow you whole in one gulp. Along with ichthyosaurs and sharks, they would shred anything that fell into the water. The Jurassic period score is as follows. Total score 19. The Cretaceous period was the absolute peak of the dinosaur age, and the most dangerous era in prehistoric history. There was one piece of fantastic news though. Flowering plants arrived, which meant fruit was finally on the menu. Even though early fruits were tiny, sour, and tasted like peppercorns, they provided vitamin C. Scurvy was officially no longer your biggest worry. In this era, your shelter was completely unsafe because any passing dinosaur could casually trample your house to pieces. Spears were still useless against the Tyrannosaurus rex. Measuring 13 meters long, weighing 8 tons, and boasting a 6-ton bite force, the T-Rex had an incredibly sharp sense of smell. It could track your scent from 10 kilometers away and track you down to eat you. Then you had dromaeosaurids, what we call raptors. They weren't huge, but they were highly intelligent pack hunters. They would surround your house at night, slip through the windows and doors, and eat you alive. In the water, Sarcosuchus and Dinosuchus stretched 12 meters long and weighed 8 tons, big enough to crush a T-Rex's skull. Even the skies were dangerous. While giant pterosaurs didn't eat humans, they could easily swoop down, scoop you up, and drop you from the clouds. Even the herbivores were a threat. 66 million years ago, an asteroid slammed into Earth, ending the age of dinosaurs. The Cretaceous period score is as follows. Total score 18. With the dinosaurs gone, Earth finally entered its most human-friendly era yet, the Paleogene. True fruits arrived, berries, nuts, and legumes, and you could finally enjoy a perfectly balanced diet. There were also plenty of fish, birds, and small mammals to hunt. Temperatures dropped close to modern levels, and the planet was covered in lush forests, giving you countless safe spots to build a home. Spears were actually useful again because predators were a much more reasonable size. Sure, there were still dangers, like Titanoboa, a 12-meter-long snake, or the terror birds, that's 2 meters tall and could disembowel you with one kick. But compared to dinosaurs, these were a walk in the park. The Paleogene period score is as follows. Total score 30. 2.5 million years ago, Earth entered the Ice Age. Massive glaciers blanketed most of the northern hemisphere. Food was plenty in the summer, but you'd find almost nothing in the winter. You had to stockpile enough food during the warm months, or you'd starve. The bitter cold was your biggest enemy. You had to build incredibly well-insulated shelters and keep a fire burning constantly. Luckily, humans had invented the bow and arrow. If you could get your hands on a bow, your survival odds skyrocketed. The wild was full of woolly mammoths, saber-toothed cats, cave bears, and cave lions. They were all highly dangerous, but the biggest threat in this era wasn't the animals, it was other humans. The Ice Age score is as follows. Total score 22. Looking at this leaderboard, doesn't it make you realize how incredibly lucky we are to live in the modern world? Because the truth is, you never know when the next mass extinction will strike.